I will say my one absolute pet peeve, a lemon is not a unit of measure. I do not like calling for the juice of one lemon or something like that. That is not a volume.
Nope.
Go to the grocery store and look at 2 lemons and make sense of that with yourself.
Yeah.
I always try to provide as many pieces of information as possible.
This is Taste. I'm your host, Matt Rodbard. In our final episode in a week-long tribute to Saveur, we speak with the magazine's current editor and CEO, Kat Craddock. Kat has a long history at the publication, including serving various roles in the test kitchen. Earlier this year, she was able to buy the publication full stop and is currently in the process of bringing back a print edition. We were so happy to have Kat in the studio to talk about the next generation of Saveur and some of the stories she is most looking forward to working on. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. Kat Craddock, this is Taste. How you doing?
I'm great, Matt. Thanks for having me.
I'm really excited to talk to you. We're having a week of Saveur. How do you pronounce it?
Saveur.
So, we've debated this off mic for a long time, and we've had a week of coverage, and I just wanted to talk to you about the future. Let's just get into it. When did you realize you could acquire this publication, this legendary publication that we've established that we all love so much, that you could acquire it as a sole owner? You're the editor-in-chief and CEO. When did you realize this?
I've been with the brand for 8 years and was a part of it the last time we were acquired, which was the middle of the pandemic a couple of years ago. And at the time, I was one of only 2 people that came along with the brand, and I saw a lot of the moving parts of how a transaction like that happened, and it really got me starting to think about it a little bit then. Last year there were some changes with the company, and I mentioned to Recurrent CEO, our former parent company, that I might be interested, and when he didn't laugh me out of the room, that was, kind of encouraging that it might be possible. And it just kind of started thinking about what might go into that. Come January, an old friend of mine mentioned that he might be interested in backing an effort to break it out. So when I went back to the Recurrent team and proposed it and made an offer. And really after that, everything moved pretty quickly. I don't know that I really knew it was possible until the ink was dry, honestly. It was,
Yeah, you never know until that contract is signed, right?
Yes, yeah.
So is Recurrent a media company? Is it private equity? I'm unfamiliar with the previous owner of your publication.
Yeah, it's a digital media company. They also own Bob Vila and some military publications. And back when we were acquired from Bonnier, we were acquired with a few other brands. They were expanding their portfolio. So we were acquired with Popular Science, Field and Stream, Outdoor Life, and Popular Photo as well. So they kind of purchased us as a package, and since then have added more brands to their portfolio as well, almost exclusively in the digital space.
But you knew that this brand could operate independently, and you reference a partner. You have a single owner, operator, partner in it. Now, when did you realize that it could actually work as a business? Because as we've established, media, and particularly food media, is very challenged and distressed, but you do not see that. You're going forward with this brand, and you see a path.
Yeah, I came up in restaurants and small businesses, and I'm used to kind of having to be scrappy and cutting corners where you can and spending where you have to, and I'm used to that sort of hustle. I think that good quality food and travel content is always going to be expensive to produce, and that isn't going to change, and it's only going to get more expensive. But I think that the way to make something like this work is as an independent brand, where you're not going to have a bunch of overhead and shared services that aren't being used, and spending where you need to be spending, and not spending on things that we don't need. Yeah.
So it's like managing costs. I'm hearing a lot of that, but also just growth, like getting brands to work with you, getting subscribers to work with you. So generally speaking, how do you keep the lights on, so to speak, for like 5, 10, 15 years in the future? Because I know that's the plan. This isn't a short-term model. How do you do that in this very unique situation?
Well, we're a couple months in, so we are figuring that out
Great.
on some level. And there are a lot of different revenue streams for us. And I think really just focusing on one or two, particularly one or two tech-based revenue streams, when tech is changing constantly and overnight, Google or Amazon can change the way they do business, and a whole gold mine could totally dry up for us.
Yeah.
We need to be paying attention to every single one of those, and it's direct sold campaigns, which honestly are pretty robust for us right now. It is programmatic, it is SEO, but also, we don't want to be an affiliate machine, but affiliate revenue is important. Licensing is important. We're looking to get back into in-person events again. And I think just optimizing every one of those streams rather than just focusing on one at the expense of everything, including brand, is how we need to, need to thrive.
Oh my gosh, you're busy. That's really smart. And I fully agree. Taste is operating in a similar way. And I feel like when you have to focus on multiple streams, it can be a lot of work, right? And a lot of balls in the air. Are you bullish on one of the particular streams? Do you think like offline events is really strong? Do you think, licensing, like New York Mag yesterday, like launched this amazing store with like brand, and your brand is as good as any?
At this point, we have a really great licensed cookware company, and that's doing well for us, and It's certainly growing. I would love to get to a point where there is a Saveur store, and we've got a lot of different products available. That is going to take a while to get to that point. But we make great sponsored content, and we have some repeat business that comes back to us every year, and I think that it's worth growing that, and nurturing those sort of relationships with brands that are a good fit for us over time.
I love it, and we're gonna get into your history and like some food stuff. We're this is a little more like media version of this show, but I think it was important to establish the future of this brand and that we care so deeply about. I have to ask you about print. It was a print publication from The Jump, and Dorothy referred to that at the beginning of this week, about the history of the publication and the founding. Broadly speaking, what's the print future for your publication?
It's a really good question. I love Saveur as a print product. I grew up reading it. I think a lot of chefs and other people in the industry grew up reading it, and I firmly believe that the food ecosystem we all live in now is largely shaped by, what Saveur was doing in the 90s and the early 2000s, really all the way up until when Recurrent folded the media publication, or
the print
publication
version of it, which was a sad day for everyone in media, and I'm sure you, in particular, it hit you hard. You've been there for 8 years, and there's no more print Saveur. Whoa.
Yeah, and we continued to produce some licensed SIPs. We put out a reedition of the Saveur New Classics cookbook. So we didn't totally stop in the print space, but yeah, it stopped being a print magazine. And I know everybody would like to see it come back. I would love to see it come back, and we're exploring what that's going to look like for sure.
Let's talk about back to your first interaction with Saveur as a magazine. Take me back to when you first realized Saveur was there as a magazine and how different it was from what was actually out there.
I was in middle school, early high school, probably when it came out, and I'm sure my mother subscribed, if not from season one, from issue one, from very early on, and it was always around. And I grew up reading it, and was just starting to cook a lot on my own and cooking for myself and my family. And there are certainly recipes that I remember cutting out or saving, when I was in high school, that I brought with me to college and I made for my friends. And, I remember reading a lot of those kind of, those beautiful, sweeping, transportive travel features. And it really kind of made the world seem a lot more accessible and attainable. And yeah, so, I remember when I was probably 16 or 17, there was this really pretty ode to the tomato in some summer issue. And, up until that point, tomatoes were this crappy thing on a salad bar or on a burger. And I never really thought of them as anything worth, paying attention to. And around that same time, my grandfather started bringing bowls of beefsteak tomatoes from his garden that he had grown. And all summer, I had read this article, and every single day I was eating, 2 or 3 whole beefsteak tomatoes. And I went back and I read the story again recently, and it was this writer, John Thorne, and it kind of seemed like between the two of them, John Thorne and my grandpa taught me like what a tomato was supposed to taste like, and it's still really important for me. And every summer, I kind of revisit that experience again. And I don't think that any other food publication, at least that I knew of back then, was really writing that kind of producing that kind of content.
Are we talking like early 2000s here? Mid 90s?
98, 99?
Yeah, around there. Thanks for that memory, Kat. I feel like we all have our interactions with Saveur in a similar way. For me, it's Saveur 100s, and just like picking up those issues. And even like early on, before food media was really online, it felt like it was kind of like locked away in print, and it would always be like, wow, there's this world out there that I have not heard about. And like, it's not celebrity driven.
it's not recipe driven, it's people driven. Certainly it's a North Star for taste, what Saveur meant, like Dorothy's era, James Oslin's era, and then your era going forward. It really means a lot.
I love those Saveur 100s, right? It was like the first food listicle.
Totally agree.
I'm still trying to figure out how to revive that franchise specifically. And is it an SIP? Is it something that lives online? Is it an event series or an award series or something? But I agree with you, and I think a lot of people loved those and really looked forward to them every year.
I'd say like all of the above. I feel like you could activate that offline at an event. You could definitely do a big package in digital, and then I would love to see the print version of the 100 come back.
Yeah, so would I.
I mean, it's exciting. And let me ask you, Kat, you were there for 8 years. So let's hear about your journey at the publication. How did you arrive? We'll get to your professional career before you worked in food editorial, but how did you arrive at Saveur, and how did you kind of work through multiple owners, multiple editor-in-chiefs? I mean, it was quite the journey. I always knew you were there, and I was always just really respected what you were doing, but it was a lot of change that you witnessed at this publication.
There was, yeah. I mean, it was a crash course in the media industry, really. I got there. I had been doing a little bit of freelance recipe testing and stuff on the side. I'd been working in restaurants. Knew I didn't want to own my own restaurant in New York City, and was kind of thinking about what the next steps were going to be. I have an English degree, had thought that I might want to be in food media at some point. Test kitchen seemed like a natural way in. I emailed Amanda Hesser cold at Food 52 and asked if they needed any help over there, and had been talking with her and came in and worked a couple days there. But they didn't really need somebody, so she put me in touch with Adam Sachs and Faraday Sadigan at Saveur. Adam Sachs was the editor-in-chief at the time, and they let me come in on my days off from working in the restaurant, and I helped out in the test kitchen, helped out at events, basically anywhere that I could be useful. I tried to be there for it. And then, as things shifted and more opportunities came up, I started dialing back my restaurant work and just working more and more with Saveur, and until they couldn't get rid of me, I guess.
Right. Then you became like a permanent fixture in the masthead. You ran culinary at some point. I mean, what else were you doing there? I mean, you rose through the ranks.
Yeah, I was the test kitchen director. I was the food editor. When Recurrent purchased us, I became the executive editor and then the editorial director.
Oh my gosh!
But I mean,
so
all along
titles.
it was just kind of staff Swiss Army knife on some a little bit of everything, and it was working across departments all along.
So what kept you there? I mean, I think I emailed you at some point. Was like, hey, do you want to come over and start working at Taste in some way? And I think you were like,
oh my gosh.
You were politely and Talia at Punch, I know had been in touch with you too. And like what kept you there? Because I know that there was probably many people who wanted you on their staff, but you stayed. You stayed for a long time, and you stayed through this, these multiple owners and this kind of in between era. What kept you there?
Yeah, I mean, with all the change that was going on, every now and then I'd kind of explore other options. But really, Saveur was the gold standard. That was the food magazine I grew up reading, and there are, quirks of all sorts of businesses and corporate life. And yes, it was very tenuous. You never knew if it was going to be there the next day or not. But I grew up in, I came up in restaurants anyway, and you never know if the door is going to be locked when you show up to your restaurant job. So I love it. And I mean, I want to be there, and I want to make sure that it survives as long as it possibly can. And so I had no intention of leaving once I got there.
Amazing to hear that. Was there a last day in the office at that 32nd Street location, your office, iconic office? And I think many of our listeners possibly were there for events. For years, there were many events at Saveur on 32nd Street in Koreatown. I think I've spent time in the office with Adam and with James, and just it was a really, really cool office.
Yeah, it was a great space, right? I miss it a lot. I think Bonza has that test kitchen now.
Stop.
I heard a rumor that.
Wait, I need to reach out to the Bonza boys and see if we could get up there and hang out.
Yeah, it's an unbelievable space. When Recurrent purchased us, it was the middle of the pandemic. Everybody was getting rid of their New York City office space. It's the center of the universe there, right? I mean, it's the middle of Midtown. I'm sure it was unbelievably expensive. And yeah, I mean, as it was changing hands, when they purchased the brand, they didn't bring the test kitchen along with them. It took a long time to clear out the props and the culinary library. We ended up donating the culinary library to the School for Food and Finance. All of the props have been moved around the state a few times, but we edited that collection down a bit. But I mean, I do consider the Saveur prop collection to be one of our most valuable assets, and I really don't want to lose that. It was a bummer to lose the space, absolutely. But we pivoted to remote testing very quickly. And I think that when I talk about reviving events in some capacity, I am very inspired by those Saveur suppers. And I think that kind of figuring out a way to bring that on the road, whether it is a supper series or Saveur salons or however we're going to reimagine that, I do want to get back to being able to entertain together with people in the industry that we're excited about.
Yeah, it was really, those were special events. I mean, was there like literally a last day when you shut off the lights that you just walked out and went down the elevator to 32nd?
Yeah, I lived in Chelsea at the time. So through the pandemic, before they got rid of the space, I would, in the middle of the pandemic when everything was locked down and there was no reason to leave your apartment except to get some exercise, I would walk up there once a week and water the plants and, take something weird out of the freezer home. Yeah. I mean, I don't know that I remember the exact last day because it was this weird, slow trickle out of there at that point.
Yeah, special space. Let's go back to your professional career before you joined Saveur. You attended culinary school in Chicago and you worked there. You ended up in New York and you worked at Per Se and were doing overnight bread baking. Let's talk about that for the group, right? You were doing overnight. What does that mean, overnight bread baking?
Yeah, I would, when I moved to the city, I lived in Bushwick for the first 6 months, and I would take the train in at like 10 o'clock at night to start my shift and be there to make, get the bread started for service for the following day. We started the viennoiserie doughs and everything like that for Bouchon, both the Time Warner Center and the Rockefeller Center Bouchon. And so the first 6 months or so with TKRG, I was doing the overnight shift, and then they kindly moved me to a 4 a.m. shift after that. So it was a little more civilized. Yeah.
Wow. So you're baking breads for Bouchons and then for Per Se as well?
Bouchon, Per Se, a couple other wholesale customers, but most of the work went into the bread service for Per Se.
What's it like working in the Keller Restaurant Group? I mean, what's the culture like there?
It's intense. It's very detail focused. I think that, probably made me a better editor in the end,
Sure.
And a better recipe tester. My hiring manager there was James Belisle, and we clicked right away. He's basically my big brother. We both grew up in New York or New England mill towns, and we're still very good friends. And I loved working with him and his team, and I learned a lot. And then when he moved, I was with TKRG for 2 years. He left shortly before I did to open Lafayette, and he brought me with him as his sous chef at the in the bread department at Lafayette.
Andrew Carr Mellini's, giant, colossal, important restaurant on Lafayette Street, downtown New York, and you ended up working there for 4 years. What's that like? What's it like? Because you walk into Lafayette and like the pastry case is what you see, is like the first thing you see. Super important to work in that department in that restaurant.
Yeah, the Supreme wasn't there yet at that time, so that's more of a recent innovation. But I was doing a lot of viennoiserie. I still kind of missed that part of the pastry world, so James was happy to let me stay involved in that.
Mm-hmm.
We were doing all of the bread for service for Lafayette, all of the bread for retail. Most of the viennoiserie was on the bread side. Some of it was kind of divvied up into the pastry department. And then we were producing all of the bread for all of Andrew Carmelini's restaurants then. So the Dutch and Le Conde Verde. We were sending burger buns over to Joe's Pub.
Mm-hmm.
So it was, it was a lot of production, but a super fun team. I did not leave that job because I didn't like that job. I kind of eased out of it slowly because I wanted to shift into a different industry.
You were working a couple of days at Saveur, as you just said, and you ended up getting there. We'll get to that pivot, but let's talk about viennoiserie. What makes a good croissant and what makes a bad croissant? I feel like you can really say this quickly.
Ooh, yeah, that's a great question. There are a lot of bad croissants out there, right?
It's challenging. It's such a hard thing to do.
It is. First of all, there's no reason to make a croissant at home.
Thank you.
We have provided recipes for croissants because people want to give it a shot, but it is so much easier to do it with professional equipment and a dough sheeter and a proof box and a convection oven. So it's support your local bakery, buy your croissants.
I agree. It's like making your own wedding engagement ring.
Yes,
it's
don't
like
do it.
You could do it, I guess, theoretically, but impossible.
But I mean, what makes a good croissant is the same thing that makes what makes a good baguette. It's at its best 2-3 hours out of the oven, and then after that, wait until the next batch comes out of the oven.
Yeah. Do you have any experiences with sheeters, like breaking in the middle of service?
Not sheeters breaking in the middle of service, but one of my coworkers and I were working an early morning brunch shift, and he had pulled the whole rack of perfectly proofed croissants out of the proof box. And it kind of a Metro rack sort of situation, but that also slides directly into the combi oven. So you would just pull it out of the proof box and slide it directly into the oven. And as he was rolling it across the floor, hit a drain or something in the floor, the wheel fell, the whole service's day's worth of perfectly proofed croissants 2 hours before service fell on the floor. It smashed into a flat plop of dough. And somehow we were able to make the croissants, which should have taken a good 6 hours start to finish. We had them on the table half an hour into service. So we totally did it from scratch and made it happen. I'm not really sure how.
You made it work. It's definitely relevant to doing food editorial, because certainly you make things work when like stories don't come in the way you want them to, or somebody doesn't bails, or like a photo doesn't work out. And let's just talk about the transition from full-time professional restaurant chef to working in food editorial. What did you bring to the table when you were doing those 2 days at Food 52 and 2 days at Saveur, eventually more and more? What did you sharpen as a professional cook that like could lead you to be a leader in food editorial?
Well, I think really coming from baking and pastry made me a lot more focused on process and details and measurements. And I think that made me a good recipe tester. And I think that, a lot of the recipe testers that we've brought in since then, the ones that come from baking and pastry are, they definitely stand out. Because if you come up on the savory side of things, it's a little more cowboy, a little more cavalier. And,
right.
That is certainly not a criticism of that type of cooking, but
a little bit, like 5% of criticism.
I don't necessarily, no. I don't think it's a criticism. I think it's a very different approach to making food. And the baking and pastry approach kind of sets you up for success in editorial. So I would encourage bakers and pastry chefs who are considering a career in editorial to think about that and be empowered by that knowledge. One of our best recipe testers right now is a former baker who worked at 7 Stars in Providence, and he's very detailed and good at his job.
Mm-hmm. Fully agree. Some of our best contributors come from the world of pastry. And it's not contributors for pastry recipes, but all recipes, and really just in general, like stories are outlined better. Mm-hmm. They come in cleaner. And really, when it comes to the recipes, they're just like lack errors that you'd see in other, more, because it's like almost like a superhuman skill to be able to be a professional pastry cook.
Yeah. And measurements are just so much more important in baking and pastry, right? And it's not the case when you're putting together a pasta on the stove or something like that, or firing off a steak. There's a lot more instinct and intuition involved in that kind of cooking, which is very hard to express. So, and I sympathize with chefs that are trying to write down their recipes, because that isn't necessarily how you're thinking when you're cooking.
Yeah, but baking is certainly and I think like Piche Ong is one example. He used to write a column for me, and really, in his busy schedule could just like fire off these like columns, and it was like, wow, man, you just like ripped it. Like, came in clean and was really interesting. Zola Gregory, one of our young contributors who's going to be writing a column for us, she comes from the world of pastry as well. And I just think it's cool. Like, there's definitely like a comparison, as you say. Let's talk about your vision going forward for Saveur. I feel like I'd like to hear, what do you value most in a food story?
That's a really great, hard question.
Yeah.
I think that there is no one format for what makes a good food story, but I think a fresh perspective, one that avoids all of the culinary cliches, one that prompts you to look at a food that you might not have thought of in a new way, that prompts you to appreciate something that you might have taken for granted. And those are the stories that I'm looking for.
So things we take for granted and showing a new lens or light on things. What is an example of something you've been working on with your team recently that did that?
Not to open up the door to scoop us or something, but I'm working on an ice cream sandwich matrix story right now. And I think we take ice cream sandwiches for granted. And I think there's a lot of room for experimentation and play in there. And I'm excited to look at what an ice cream sandwich can be from a lot of different directions and provide inspiration for people to be able to do the same thing.
I love that. So no scoops here, safe zone. ice cream sandwiches? What, like, are we talking about like non-traditional, a non-traditional, like, not the bread of the sandwich? Are you talking about that? Or are you talking about ways the ice cream is shaped in a sandwich?
All of the above, the components, the inside, the outside, the drizzle, the stuff you roll it in, all of these different pieces really provide an opportunity to choose your own adventure, right? And I think that there are so many talented pastry chefs out there and ice cream shops in the United States and beyond that are doing really cool things with different flavors and incorporating ingredients and flavors from cultures that may not have been ice cream cultures before, and that's very exciting.
Cool.
So I want to be able to play with that a little bit and let other people dig into those sorts of recipes. I always find sandwich recipes in particular kind of weird because it's just put stuff together, right? And I think that it's the components are where it's interesting. It's the bread, it's how you cook the meat, it's what the condiments are. So that's where I like to play, and I like to provide all of those pieces for people so they can do whatever they want with it. And I'm approaching ice cream sandwiches in the same way. So I want to be able to provide all of the different components for something and let people run with it from there. And maybe you only want to make the ice cream. Maybe you only want to make the cookie or whatever the piece of the puzzle is. Or maybe you want to make all of it and have an ice cream sandwich party and let your guests, play and riff and come up with new combinations.
Kat, I love this. It's really smart, and I can't wait to read this package when it comes out. Let me ask you, we struggle with this a bit here, and you may have a take. Like, right now, when talking about food content online, outside of the recipe, which is like, obviously how to make something, it's a very specific format that we all know. But then when you get into that like middle of home cooking, like how to do something, and when it's like in the written form, how do you negotiate that in this world where we observe day after day, more and more people are learning to cook from short form video, typically social, like Reels and TikTok, but also middle form to long form in YouTube and also on television. How do you square with that when you're thinking about doing more detailed, instructive content?
I think there's room for both, right? And we are looking at different ways that we're going to re-enter a video. We used to do it a lot in the old days and got away from it for a while. I think it's really exciting to be able to learn how to do something in a 30-second clip and then absorb that information. And it's just your skill. It's just second nature at that point. But if you want to learn how to do something that you've never done before and you want to understand what it's supposed to smell like at this stage, what it's supposed to look like and sound like when you're cooking it, I think that having something written down is a lot more instructive if you really want to absorb, how to recreate something that somebody else has made. And I think there is room for both, and I think people want both.
Fully agree. Thank you. I think it's just a struggle to figure out who wants what. And also, of course, cookbooks will always be around. Cookbooks are ultimately that. It's like when you want to actually learn something, you pick up a cookbook and you read it and you learn.
Cookbooks continue to sell. People still want them. I think there is this sort of false message out there that, the kids don't want print media. The kids don't want recipes. The kids don't want books. They don't want magazines. I don't think that's true. I think, the kids want vinyl records. There's still a desire for quality print products and publications and the written word, just because there is a new way of conveying information that people are excited about. That I don't necessarily see it as a replacement or an either or scenario.
Well, you've certainly lined me up to talk about cookbooks. We obviously are recording this here at Penguin Random House. We work at Crown with 10 Speed Press and Clarkson Potter and many other imprints that publish cookbooks. And I fully agree that the cookbook is stronger than ever, and the kids certainly want cookbooks. It's like such a it's a affordable luxury to buy a cookbook. You're buying something for between $30 and $45 to $50, and it's a lot of information that short form video, that even online content is not going to give you. And certainly, I think the kids, it's funny that you say that, it's so true, want to pick up books. Books are selling. Books are valuable. They're tactile. They're finite. And I think there's definitely a tendency to say, well, the kids don't want to do this because this is popular. So I fully agree with you. They kind of operate in different worlds.
Yeah. And, we hear a lot of feedback that people don't want ads. They don't want, ads interrupting their consumption of content. It's like, well, you could buy a cookbook. There are no ads in that cookbook, right?
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, I think cookbooks are definitely that. You're not going to get the pop-up. And certainly there's an interesting future with how we make cookbooks that align with online culture and make them maybe faster, maybe make them more relevant to a different audience. And I think do you guys have a cookbook future for you? So I know you have this archive, which I want to talk about, but do you have a future plan for that?
Yeah, that's a great question. We have produced several cookbooks
You
over
sure
the
have.
years, and one of the most recent ones was a reedition of the Saveur New Classics, kind of in the same realm as the Joy of Cooking or the New York Times cookbook. It's our compendium of 1,000+ recipes from our pages around over the years, and we revisited that about 7 years after the original version, which James Osland and Helen Rosner had worked on. Revisited that, changed some things out, added some new photos, added a couple new chapters. I worked really closely with Shane Mitchell on overhauling that one and creating a new edition for people. It's available and out there now, and we're really proud of it. And we're absolutely open to working on new. Call us, because we're absolutely open
Love
to
it.
working on more cookbooks moving forward.
Love to call you. Love to work on something with you. I'd love to collab with you. I love Taste and Saveur to do something together. I think it'd be really exciting.
That would be great.
So you have recently been geeking out, as you have said, looking at the archive of recipes that you own now, that is part of Saveur's legacy. Let me ask you, what do you mean by geeking out? It must be so cool to go back and look in this archive, going back all these years.
Yeah, I mean, on some level, I feel like I won storage wars with this acquisition. So when all the boxes started coming in, yeah, I knew there were hard drives. I knew there were CDs of old photos. All that's going to be important, and we're working on digitizing that so it's easier for us to access. But, I'll open another box, and it'll be film negatives and prints that Christopher Hersheimer shot in the mid-90s. Or I'll open another box, and it'll be full of hand-painted illustrations that were commissioned for early era Saveurs as well. So there's some amazing stuff in the archives that we're working with a couple different people, an art librarian, and to preserve properly and make sure that we can access them and that we can use them so other people can see them too. We also have 8,000 some odd recipes on the website. When the website launched in, I want to say 2002, a long time ago. SEO didn't really exist, or maybe it existed, but people weren't thinking about it. And a lot of those recipes were just kind of copied and pasted out of the print magazine. They're there, you can use them. The recipes are great. They've been tested, but a lot of them don't have their photographs. It's hard to find them, and a lot of them don't. Since they were just copied and pasted out of a story, they don't have the links. They're not connected back to their original context, and we're all about connecting recipes to their original context. So taking the time to go back through those, rework them to our most current style guide, reconnect the head notes back to their original source, make sure that things are properly bylined, that that recipe sources as well as story sources are acknowledged, and it's a lot of work, but it's really exciting, and it's this kind of scavenger hunt project that we're working through gradually.
Yeah, amazing project. I mean, are you also publishing some of the feature from the 90s into the 2000s, some of the stories that maybe weren't living online?
A lot of them are online already. It's just it's hard to navigate to them. So it is allowing us to unearth them and re-promote them. And
that's really cool. What does the archive look like? Like physically, is it in a space that you say you're going through boxes? Or where are those boxes, and what does it look like?
It's in a storage unit in my basement.
Oh my gosh!
They were. I mean, our former parent company, Bonnier, they were based in Winter Park, Florida. So a lot of their creative director was down there for a while, and a lot of the visual archive came up from Florida, and then was in recurrent storage unit in New Jersey, and then really has been shuffled up and down the East Coast for a while. So the fact that all of this stuff has survived and is in good condition is
amazing to hear
a miracle.
There wasn't like a flood. There wasn't a lost truck. There wasn't a lost box.
Oh my God! Don't even say flood.
Oh no!
I'm so worried about a flood in my basement, but we're in Stuytown, but we're pretty near the river, so I do worry about it. But yeah, I mean, it's 2 big storage units full of paperwork and hard drives and CDs, and then we also have the Saveur prop collection is in our culinary producer's home studio out in Brooklyn.
Oh my gosh, these archives are so valuable and useful, and I just can't wait to see what you do with the archive. I mean, that is like truly what's exciting about Saveur. How do you wake up in the morning? What do you feel like when we've got this massive project? Do you have excitement? Do you have anxiety? What do you feel like?
All of that. Yeah. I mean, I wake up feeling pretty terrified. And then once I start moving, there's a lot to do, and work through that to-do list of the business side of running a publication at this point, and still trying to be involved and edit as much as possible, and spinning all of these different plates.
Impossible to do line edits and run a business. It's impossible. Not
you
impossible.
are right. It is hard to do it
Hard.
all.
Sorry,
I mean,
I
I
mean
never
hyperbolic.
make it through the whole list at the end of the day,
Yeah.
but we tick through it as much as we can. And I have a really impressive team too that is supporting a lot and has taken on a lot more. Each of them have taken on a lot more responsibilities as well after the acquisition. So I certainly could not do this by myself.
Yeah, and you told me off mic you're getting the team together. You're a remote staff. You're all over the world, but you're getting everyone into New York. What is that agenda going to be like, and where are you guys going to eat?
Yeah, great question. I'm very excited about that. We have most of our meals booked, but there are still some open spaces. So if you have suggestions for a group, I would love them.
Yeah.
But we're going to have one of our monthly photo shoots next Tuesday. After dinner on Tuesday, we're going to all eat at Cafe Spaghetti out in Brooklyn. Sal Lambolia and I work together at Lafayette, and he is such a great chef and good dude. So I'm excited to eat there. And then the following day, we're all going to convene in my apartment in Stuytown. We're getting Mala project delivered. We're going to do some kind of workshopping a bunch of different projects that we have in the pipeline. And yeah,
Exciting.
that's about it.
I get so excited to hear about new projects and where you're going to take it. Consider us a huge fan here at Taste, and whatever we can do to collab and help you out, spread the word. Not that
Thank
you
you.
need us, but like it's exciting. Food media is hard. It's challenging. Let me ask you about recipes. When you are testing a recipe, is there a flaw that you're looking for first that occur time after time in a recipe?
We get recipes from so many different places and people, and I usually go into testing any recipe assuming that it is right, and it is my job to translate that and
Amazing.
make it clear for the home reader. The first things that I go in and I look for are like, well, are the measurements all in the same type of unit? If there are multiple components, are you going to have crazy leftovers of one component after you use up the other component? And how can we balance that out and make sure that people aren't overmaking or overbuying ingredients? Those are really the problems that I look for first. I don't really assume that there's going to be something flawed about the actual knowledge behind the recipe.
Open-minded.
We try.
I love it. I love that approach. Is there a certain recipe that you enjoy, testing yourself? Is there like a challenge that you enjoy with testing?
I think that this is sort of a testing issue and also a recipe editing issue. Whenever there is any involved shaping technique that needs to be described, I think it's very hard and very satisfying when it's done right. So a lot of that ends up being like a bread baking recipe or maybe a pasta shaping recipe or something like that, or often pastry comes into it. But figuring out a way to describe something that maybe should be a TikTok video showing how to do it. Is there a way to explain to somebody a technique, a particular way that you hold your hand, a particular way that you fold a piece of dough? I find figuring out how to do that really, really satisfying.
It is such a challenge, and it goes back to my original, and I'm glad you brought up the TikTok video. Like a small football, for example, when you say something is a small football shape, it's like there's many small footballs out
how
there.
small?
Exactly. And like when it's in written form and there isn't a diagram or some kind of illustration and sidebar, it's so challenging. So when you crack that code, you're satisfied.
I will say my one absolute pet peeve, and whenever I bring in an intern or train somebody on testing recipes or editing recipe, a lemon is not a unit of measure. I do not like calling for the juice of one lemon or something like that. That is not a volume.
Nope.
Go to the grocery store and look at 2 lemons and make sense of that with yourself.
Yeah.
I always try to provide as many pieces of information as possible.
Let's get into it. Weight versus volumetric for pastry. Grams versus spoons. How do you negotiate those two things? Because I feel pastry chef in you is going to want to go one way, and
yeah,
the rest of us
if
don't
it
wanna
were
go the other.
entirely up to me, everything would be written in grams, and I think a lot of people from the industry feel the same way. I have tried to start integrating more gram measurements on baking and pastry recipes. I feel like when it matters, it really matters, and I don't mind deviating from the style guide if it's going to help somebody, execute a recipe better. For years we relied on 1 unit of measure because it was a matter of fitting into print.
Yeah.
That isn't necessarily a problem if you're presenting a recipe online. However, if it's super long and too much information, it's going to overwhelm people. So we try and find that balance between what are too many pieces of information and what is going to just make it more accessible to different people. And I think that, the King Arthur Flour website does a really nice job of having kind of toggling
the toggle's cool.
functions on there. And I'd love to be able to offer that at some point too.
The toggle is great. I love those guys, and I feel like only you can determine your destiny. And I feel like using grams for pastry is what everyone should use. I mean, buying a $12 digital scale is essential if you're going to bake anything in your home kitchen.
Yeah, and I mean, you dirty less things if you just put a bowl on a scale and throw everything into it. I don't like to have to wash every measuring spoon and cup.
There's a thing about the scale, and listeners will know we've discussed this many times, but there's a thing about the scale that people, they home cooks feel it's just complicated. The tare button scares people, like there's going to be some kind of complicated step when in fact it's literally one button that does literally one thing.
Yeah, I also wonder if it's a little too associated with diet culture and being finicky about, how much of an ingredient you're consuming. And that it takes the fun out of cooking on some level in that way.
The cocaine trade as well.
Sure.
I feel that as
pharmaceutical
well.
industry.
Yeah, that comes into play. But I agree that there's definitely this like stigma about having a scale in your kitchen that might be like a little weird with diet culture. Good point. Really good point. I just think, listener, just buy that digital scale. Crack open like a Yodam book, crack open a David Leibowitz book where there's definitely very well-tested gram measurements. Check out Saveur where there's really well-tested gram measurements, and it's going to make your pastry experience better. That cookie is not going to be cakey. It's going to actually be crispy. And that's because of the gram scale. It's not because of the products. It's not because of you being good or bad. It's like literally you're messing it up by using volumetric.
Yeah, and we can explain to somebody a million times how to scoop flour into a measuring cup and level off the top. Half the people in the world are going to do that and the other half are not. And a cup of flour is going to be wildly different amounts of flour from one person to the next.
Well, Kat, I mean, our instinct, I think, as people is to put the most possible, like the highest amount of something into a box. Like when we're packing, it's like having a light packing touch is not our human instinct. It's like we need more. And that's what screws you up with flour measurements. You pack.
Sure. And a measuring cup looks like a scoop, right? Your instinct is to scoop with the scoop. So scooping into the scoop and dirtying another spoon to do that is not intuitive at all.
Good point. Scooping into the scoop is essential, right? Because you're going to be packing way too much if you actually scoop with the measuring cup. Oh my gosh. We could talk about that forever. Why don't you come back and we can actually have a baking episode. We talk about that in detail.
That would be great.
But on This Is Taste, we ask guests about their discerning tastes. So to close this interview, here's a little rapid-fire Fast and Furious taste check for you. Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. The best AM pastry with coffee.
I am a sweets person in the afternoon. In the morning, it's sourdough toast and cultured butter.
Oh, sick. Love that. The best dessert, period.
This is going to sound very pretentious, but when I was working at Per Se, the pastry chef at the time, Elwyn Boyles, made a marjolaine for a while. And I don't know, have you ever had a marjolaine?
No.
It's a very classic old French dessert. And it's layers of hazelnut dacquoise, chocolate ganache, whipped creme fraiche, and hazelnut buttercream. And of course, they made big sheets of it. And of course, they would cut, laser cut perfect little strips of this stuff for service. So there was a ton of trim left over after every single batch. And I must have eaten like my weight in this stuff. It was unbelievable.
Was the hazelnut cream the best part? It sounds like that
it
to me.
It just all comes together in these beautiful different textures and a lot of layers of really sweet and bitter.
Yeah.
Perfectly balanced, perfectly delicious.
I love this. The best bread, period.
I mean, I still crave Lafayette's pain au levain.
Yeah.
But there is a bakery in Paris called Mamiche that has a muesli miche. Mm. So it's like a rye, kind of sour rye with lots of dried fruit and nuts and oats in it. And it's absolutely the best bread with cheese.
Oh my God. With cheese is so good. I love that combination. Is it lightly toasted or just the bread sliced?
I just bought a hunk of it. They sell it by the whole half or quarter, I think. And yeah, I mean, when I was in Paris last, I tore it apart in my hotel room. There was no slicing. There was no toasting.
No, you just ate it. The most underrated piece of kitchen equipment.
Plastic bowl scrapers, I think. I mean, I use them all the time. They're great for cleaning up messes. I use them instead of spatulas pretty frequently. I probably have like 10 of them floating around in my kitchen.
Yeah, keep them on your counter. I mean, just keep them there, and you'll find reasons to use it.
Whenever you drop an egg on the floor, just scoop that right up.
Oh my gosh, always happens. Yeah, great for cleanup. That's a great point. Like, I think, or bench scrapers is great for cleanup. The most overrated piece of kitchen equipment.
I mean, anything with a single use that lives on the counter, probably.
Oh my gosh, a single use, like we're talking about, like a lemon juicer.
Yeah. I mean, maybe the big stand-up lemon juicers.
The big guys.
People are very committed to rice cookers. I believe in a rice cooker, but I am never gonna give up space on my tiny New York City counter for a rice cooker, ice cream maker, waffle iron. All of that stuff.
Yeah, I totally agree. One New York City restaurant that you are like super into right now.
I love King so much. And I'm excited about Jupiter as well. So the same chefs, but King is probably my favorite spot.
It's great. Kat, your favorite cookbook of all time? Single title.
One title. Oh my gosh. It changes all the time. I probably need the most inspiration with cooking vegetables. So I always go back to Deborah Madison's Vegetarian Cooking for Everybody.
A real classic. Definitely agree. Recent cookbook discovery that you've really been impressed with? I'm
very excited about Lara Lee's new cookbook, A Splash of Soy. Her first one, Coconut and Sambal, was really great too. She's Indonesian, has grown up in Australia, lives in London, and the new book really kind of brings in all of those different influences really well. And I'm very excited to make several things out of it.
A terrific recipe writer, absolutely, Lara Lee. Your favorite story to work on at Saveur? Do you have a single favorite story that you worked on? It could be a recipe development story, it could be a travel story.
I'm going to be hard-pressed to pick a single story. I will tell you one of the writers I'm most excited about right now is Von Stafford Gray. He came to us through a cold pitch about mangoes, and he is such a delight to edit. He is hilarious. His writing is detailed and smart, and all of his recipes come in great shape, and they always kill it for us online as well. He's primarily writing Jamaican and Caribbean recipe content for us, and they're so popular and so good.
Awesome. Von Stafford Gray.
Von Stafford Gray.
Remember that name. Is there a favorite food media that's not called Saveur that you subscribe to, that you like, that you want to call out?
The Taste Podcast.
Oh my God, please no. That's never the intention. Anything, I just like, you have great taste and you follow the industry. What do you like? What are you reading?
I mean, I think the guys at Food and Wine are doing a great job. There are a lot of Saveur vets over there,
Sure.
I love the food coverage at Bitter Southerner too.
Last question, your favorite sandwich of all time, what is that?
I've been getting the fried chicken sandwiches from Rowdy Rooster at least once a month right now. It's pretty close to my apartment. They recently started delivering as well. They do a great job.
It's like, so 1 to 5, what's your spice?
Oh man, when I was younger, it would have been a 4 or 5, but my gut health is not what it once was. So I usually kind of linger around 2 or 3 these days. They don't mess around.
They don't mess around. I'm definitely on the 2 scale, and 2 is like hitting like right at the edge for me. Totally agree. Rowdy Rooster sandwiches are so good. Love that. Kat Craddock, thank you for joining This Is Taste.
Thanks so much for having me.
This Is Taste is hosted by Eliza Abarbanel and me, Matt Rodbar. The show is produced by Shalia Harris and Pat Stango and edited by Clayton Gumbert. Theme music by Steve Rydell. Visit Taste online at tastecooking.com and make sure to subscribe to our newsletter for updates on all cool things that are happening.